Do you trust our election process in America today? In a recent poll, 1 in 5 mail-in voters admitted to committing at least one kind of fraud during the 2020 election. Today, we have rigged election machines and ballots appearing out of nowhere, and it's not happening in a far-off dictatorship. This massive voter fraud is happening right here in America. On this episode, I'm sharing with you a recent interview I did with an award-winning filmmaker, Matthew Thayer, when I filled in as a guest host of the Tamara Scott Show live on Lindell TV. We talk with Matthew about his new documentary that reveals the election fraud that took place in Maricopa County, Arizona, at every level of the election process in 2022. These findings call into question the results of Kari Lake's loss in the governor's race and highlights election integrity concerns across the nation. Matt also shares with us why the Justice Department and the judicial system altogether seems to be playing along with this election fraud. Make sure to stick around until the end and you'll hear how you can watch this groundbreaking new film. Do you have confidence in our election process today in America, or do you maybe have some questions about maybe there's some funny things going on, maybe in 2020 and in 2022, even perhaps back in 2016? Well, that's what we're going to talk about on today's show. Welcome to the Tamara Scott Show. I'm Ryan Howard, in for Tamara today. We have got a pretty exciting episode today that we're going to be talking about. Now, in 2024, we have what is arguably the most important presidential election in our nation's history, and our elections must be secure. And if you're like me, you have your eyes wide open, you're not asleep, and you see some concerning factors. And today we're having a guest that's going to talk to us about some of those things that have been going on in Arizona. He's the creator of a new film that's coming out here this month, and you're going to find out how you can watch it. And you're going to learn all about what's happening in Arizona, in Maricopa County, the fourth largest county in America. And it's related to the governor's race that Kari Lake was involved in, and Kari Lake is now running for the Senate. But this is really an eye-opening film, and we're going to talk with the creator of that film today. You're really going to enjoy this conversation. Now, before we get into that, we got to say a quick word about our sponsors. Now, first, we want to thank MyPillow, and you can use promo code Tamara for great savings at mypillow.com, my store, or My Coffee Products. And when you support MyPillow using promo code Tamara, you can save up to 80% on great products that bless you, your family, and your home. Now, you also help us share the truth across the globe. The Tamara Scott Show works hard to bring you great guests and present truth in ways that you might not otherwise hear. It's an honor to have you use promo code Tamara. Now, our second sponsor we want to thank is Bella Grace Elixir. Bella Grace Elixir offers 3 key ingredients that help bring health from the inside out. In 2022, Bella Grace Elixir won an award for helping with cognitive function, and in 2023, Bella Grace was awarded as a startup star in the athletics for outstanding new ingredients, formats, and benefits shaping the sports and active nutrition industry. It is a product for both men and women. You can use the QR code you see on the screen to save 10%, or you can visit the link tamara.bellagraceglobal.com, and you can get the additional free cost of shipping with that as well. So thank you to our sponsors, MyPillow and Bella Grace Elixir. Now, before we bring on our guest, we actually have a treat for you, and we're going to play the trailer for this new film that you're going to be able to watch on December 20th, and you're going to find out how you can watch that. And just as a little intro, this film tells the true story about the state of elections in Maricopa County, which I mentioned already is the fourth largest county in America, and that's in Arizona. And it follows the true story of Kari Lake's legal team and the citizen volunteers who came together during 2 court trials challenging the November 2022 general election. No doubt you heard about this. You're a watcher of this show, and you're involved and engaged in what's going on there. And we're going to find out a lot from this film, and Matt's going to talk with us about that today, the director of this film. And so you'll be able to judge for yourself the evidence that's presented in this film, and you'll see that it's quite a few things going on there behind the scenes. So let's go ahead and roll that trailer, and then we'll get Matt on with us here.
Voters are already lining up at the polls in what looks like a record-breaking turnout for Arizona.
The polls were close in 2020 and yet again here in 2022.
Things started off pretty well.
Right now, votes that are coming in are going our way.
And then went downhill from there.
Maricopa County seems to be having trouble.
The lines were outside the building.
One of the tabulators is not working.
Well, nothing's working.
She tried to vote and her ballot was rejected 20 times.
7,000 rejections every 30
There are
minutes.
still hundreds of thousands of ballots left to be counted.
Still being counted.
For it to happen now is kind of strange.
Can people be confident their vote will count?
There is a feeling that something's not right.
And we looked at the video footage. The math doesn't add up.
Why did they scan in more ballots than they have record of receiving?
Such egregious mismatches.
We found voter registrations that had no signature.
They remove the seals.
Remove the memory cards, which is breaking the law.
Day one of the 2-day trial.
Clay, what did you find out? I saw it in the war room.
It's a different process for Election Day. There's no other process for Election Day spelled out in the law.
4 times he denied that never could occur.
So are you changing your testimony?
Scott, why are you running from us?
Were you coached by legal counsel? Constant messaging of deny, deny, deny.
Scott, how do you boldly lie like that?
Well, I want to welcome award-winning filmmaker Matthew Thayer back to the Tamara Scott Show. Matt, it is just awesome to have you on with us today.
Hey, thanks, buddy. How are you? Doing good?
Yeah, we're doing great. You know, you've been on this show before, and you've been on my podcast, Cutting Edge Faith, several times, and it's always a big hit. And you're bringing us the truth about what's going on and helping us talk about what changes is happening in Hollywood and in Christian media and in this type of media where we're telling the truth. And let's just start out right now with, why this film? Why now? Why is this so important?
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of interesting because, we're men of faith, and so we always see, God's timing and everything. But last summer, the lawyers involved in Kari Lake's ongoing kind of legal battles, and a lot of people don't realize, what's going on because it's, on the surface, not only because people don't really understand the legal process, but then also the media is, of course, spinning things and all of that sort of stuff. So it's hard to make heads or tails of what's going on. But there is still legal action going on with Kari, and she has not given up that governor race, even though she is now deciding to run for Senate as well. She, all of that is still happening behind the scenes. And so the lawyers came to us and said, would you help us, put something out into the court of public opinion, because really this is where the battle is now. A lot of people are starting to become familiar with the word lawfare, especially with what's happening with President Trump and, some of these legal actions that are being taken that just seem to kind of be meant to drain people of resources or to spin something a certain way. And so the legal system is definitely being used in that way. And so now it's kind of becoming to the point where even though, because a lot of people will watch the news and they'll go like, well, Kari Lake's lost, her team lost, so everything must have been good. And you're like, well, if we had a completely impartial judicial system, yes, that would, we could have a little bit more faith in that. But we're starting to find more and more every single day that our Department of Justice is not the Department of Injustice, really. And, there are people on the take at the judicial level. We watch movies about this that happening back in the old days, like in the 1800s, of like judges being on the take or dirty sheriffs or whatever. But for whatever reason, when it comes to this day and age, we seem to think like, oh, yeah, no, everything's cool, which I think it's probably never been this bad. And so, so we were charged with taking the briefs, taking the cases, and kind of distilling down the facts, distilling down what the team had found, and putting it together and stringing it together in a way to where you could put this in front of somebody who, maybe they're on X, maybe they voted for Biden, maybe all of a sudden they're starting to have second thoughts and wondering maybe all of this election stuff is actually there's something to this. And so putting this in front of somebody like that, kind of a primer of what's going on. And so that you can walk away going, oh, I think that something smells wrong.
Well, it sounds like that. I mean, we talk a lot about the election process, and I mean, those are pretty. I mean, you just see the videos, even in the trailer. I mean, you just see the craziness of what's happening there. But you're saying that there's also an issue in our justice system where they're trying to get these cases heard and that sort of thing. Is that what you're saying as well?
Oh yeah, no, it's absolutely a system that's designed to protect the system. I mean, that's the point. That's one of the things that we touch on in the documentary, is that the system that we're really up against is, yes, 100% the fraudulent election system that's been put into place, but now we're also dealing with a judicial system that's running cover for this. And some of it's not just because of some of it's not necessarily because of corruption. Some of it is because some of it's because these people are simply let's see. Well, let me put it this way. I'll tell you a story. I had a friend of mine who told me about how he had talked to a guy who owns the kind of like the payday loan chain, like, one of those, quick, cash your payday check kind of thing. And he said, you would never guess that our best clients are doctors and lawyers. And the guy was like, whoa, really? And he said, yeah. He says, because they have such an image to keep up with, and so they are usually in copious amounts of debt, and so they're just always hand to mouth. Doesn't matter how much money they bring in. And so so when you have a system like that kind of set up with these lawyers and judges and things like that, all of a sudden the threat of the threat of kind of public shaming, or losing your law license, or like in the case of a doctor losing your medical license, your entire facade of your life is now going to just completely crumble. And so some of these people are just not in a position of strength. And so when you're not in a position of strength, you're very, susceptible to the fear of man, to what people are going to think of you and your reputation. And so if, somebody like that is on the bench and they're, all of a sudden kind of forced or pressured, just even peer pressure, social pressure, to make a decision that seems to be expediently better for them personally, rather than actually based on the facts or the truth or what's good for the country. A lot of people, unfortunately, are just in a position where they're going to make the choice for themselves and not for what's best for posterity.
Yeah, I think this is a good point, because we have, like you said, in their circles, they may not, they're worried about how they look and all that. But what your films do is help move the public view of these things so that is becoming a smaller, I mean, it's already a small group of elites that think that way, but it's becoming more public with, your film, this film, and the Trump I Know that you had, which is the only documentary about Trump that had an interview with Trump in it, where you talk about how the women around Trump actually see Trump. And so you're just giving the truth and bring that into the public narrative. And I would say, hopefully, as we start to see people like you standing up, and like me, and like all these others around, just everyday Americans standing up for what's true, it's sort of giving some more boldness for people to take their stand. I mean, that's what I want to do with my podcast, is help people be educated on what's going on, understand the times, but also be ready to take their stand on the stage for the values, and be willing to hold what God gave them in an open hand, like Esther, perhaps for such a time as this is exactly why you're in that position. And unfortunately, we have judges that have not been able to make that. Is that the specific thing that we're going to find out in this film? Not to spoil it, but I mean, it's one of the things. It's one of the things,
it's because part of the challenge with documentaries for me is always to find kind of a narrative thread or a story through, because as good as the facts are, people aren't moved to action because of facts. Sadly, they're moved to action because, emotion, or, you kind of catch them, in that gut level feeling. And so part of what we're telling the story is, the couple of these lawyers, I mean, they're facing, sanctions from the bar. I mean, these guys are actually putting everything on the line, very similar to the way our founding fathers, were like, hey, we might hang for this, and we're not, afraid of necessarily a public lynching like they would be back then, but they, it's like we have different kinds of public persecution at this point, different kinds of assassination. You can have character assassination, digital assassination. There's all sorts of different kinds of assassination that can happen now. Legal assassination, where all of a sudden it's like you're no longer able to conduct business and everybody thinks that you're a complete failure and fraud and sham and shame. And, if they can do that to you, that's just the same as, destroying your life in other ways. So, when you see people like that continuing to, when you see people facing those types of odds and those types of persecution and continuing to push forward, you have to take a second look. You have to take a second look and go, okay, so why would a reasonable person do this? Why would a reasonable person put this kind of skin in the game unless they were convinced that what they were presenting was true? And I think that's the value of the time that we've had over the last couple of years since the 2020 election. I think that's what's playing into the Trump narrative right now, why his numbers keep going up and up and up, regardless of how many indictments he gets thrown at him, because people are starting to realize, wait a minute, hold on a second, there's just no reason why, a regular, reasonable person that didn't have, something, that didn't know something, that didn't, why are they continuing to do this? This doesn't make any sense. So that's what these documentaries are hopefully meant to do, is to take the story of what's been going on, kind of scrape off the spin that's, because a lot of these things happen in real time. So you see, like, and these court cases can take, several months, oftentimes, and years. And so, you hear about it a little bit here, and then you hear about it a little bit there, and then you hear about it a little bit over here, and then a couple of months later, okay, something happened. And it's hard for most people to keep track of that kind of timeline. And so the beauty of a project like this is that even though we weren't able to get into all of the details, because it's a lot of case, but that's what the website's for. If you go to state-of-denial.com, we're going to start populating that with the actual evidence and documents, and anybody that wants to, that has the interest, can go and actually look at the documentation, look at the evidence, look at the things that were presented, and see that there actually is something to this. And for the fact that they're having to go through judge after judge after judge after judge just is pointing to a deeper systemic problem.
Yeah, and I want to double down on the point you made about the fact that these attorneys have to make a potential significant personal sacrifice to even move forward with these things. I mean, even yourself making different films. I mean, all of your films are they're very hard, cutting edge truth, and not some people just don't want to hear that, and people in power don't want to hear that. But fortunately, many of us out here in the real world do want to hear it, and it's moving the needle and really making a difference, and it's getting more people excited to run for office or to push on legislators to actually pay attention to what's going on and being woken up. But if you contrast what it takes for like these lawyers in this situation to expose the truth, if you contrast to what it costs to the people on the left trying to come against Trump and trying to come get, like, it costs them nothing. Like, in fact, it puts another feather in their hat with the people that they're around to help them make them look better. And so it costs nothing. And so, like you said, that in and of itself says something. And so I think it's important that we highlight that difference there. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you go about making a film like this. I mean, I know you say it's like you're going out in the jungle and you film something and hopefully you get a story and you find the animals doing whatever and here this, I mean, so you've got interviews you're doing, or tell us about the process of even, okay, you got invited. Okay, step one, step two, what are you doing to put this film together?
Well, and it's honestly, like, I thank you for, for commending me as far as my courage in doing this. I feel like I'm kind of the least of these when it comes to, because it's like having done a documentary about somebody like Tina Peters, who has her FBI, her door, shattered by the FBI, or doing this about Kari Lake, or the stuff that General Flynn's gone through. It's like I'm just a guy that's putting a story together for people to watch. These guys are the real ones, that are the real heroes that are through all of this. But when it comes to just the process of something like this, it just kind of depends. Like you said, I mean, when it came to the Trump, I know we really didn't have a lot of anything to go on other than an invitation from Laura Trump, and so we were just going to go down and film what we could, and see if we could kind of get a story out of it. So it's very kind of like a wildlife documentary kind of a thing, where you film, like you said, the animals out in the jungle, and you find some stuff that they're doing, and then you get somebody with a British accent to narrate it, and all of a sudden now you have a nature documentary. But in this case, this was a little bit different because we already had a lot of the legal briefs, and so we had a lot of the evidence, a lot of the stuff that we knew was going to be in the documentary. And then we worked with the team, Kari Lake's team, the legal one, to decide who is going to be interviewed, right? And what were these particular people's strengths, based on the evidence that we knew we wanted to be in the documentary, who could speak into that. And so we did a series of pre-interviews. So we'll pre-interview people kind of over the phone, get for an hour or so, get their story, write some notes, and then we kind of confer, and then write some questions and notes based on those calls, and then we'll interview them. And then once the interview is done, then we'll kind of go through the process of cutting together the information, and what's relevant, what were the things that kind of stood out, all of that, but always kind of coming at it from the standpoint of who's our target audience. And like I said, our target audience is somebody mostly fresh off the boat, you know what I mean, somebody that's just like, I just saw this poll, I think I sent you a poll this morning from Rasmussen that says that 1 out of 5 mail-in voters admit to committing some sort of fraud. Okay, so that's 20%, right? All of a sudden you see a poll like that, and on top of, record inflation, the border just basically non-existent, different pockets of war happening all over the world, all of this unrest that happened within the last 3 years, there's people with this kind of proverbial mental whiplash that's happening right now, and they're starting to kind of, wait a minute, hold on a second, something's wrong. How come all of a sudden, like 4 years ago, you were trying to tell me that everything's going to hell in a handbasket, and yet everything was relatively peaceful, and you were telling me to hate Orange Man, and now all of a sudden it's like the guy that you said needed to be in there is now in there, and it seems like everything's going to proverbial hell. So people are starting to wake up, right? And so when you make a documentary like this, you're kind of going, okay, who's my target, right? Who's going to be the people that this is going to need to get to? And so you come at it from the standpoint of if I was watching this and I didn't know anything, what would I need to know first, and then second and third and so on, so that by the time I get done watching this for, an hour and 20 minutes, I'm going to be able to walk away and go, yeah, I think I have a pretty good understanding, at least, of the basics of what's going on. And then that, raises more questions in their minds, hopefully. And if you can raise more questions in somebody's mind, then once you get a question in your head, it's really hard to get rid of unless you find a great answer for it. And right now, unfortunately, fortunately for us, the left just doesn't have any good answers for any of the questions that people are asking. And those of us on the right that are trying to put this kind of information out don't have all of the answers, but I think our answers are a little bit closer to over the target, which is, I think, starting to satisfy, the curiosity that people are starting it's just starting to percolate in people.
Yeah, and I think I love that idea of, I mean, yeah, of course you need to consider your audience, but it's a good point to where not everybody might have that background. And how do you make sure that the point you want to make with the video lands? And I like the point also about you're sort of creating open loops. It's like the psychological thing where people just have this need to close the loop. And I like your point about, yeah, the left doesn't have any answers. They can't close any of these loops. And
Right.
it opens 1,000 more loops and gives you questions about even things that you thought you already knew and that they said before. And now you're questioning everything. I mean, it brings us to critical thinking. I mean, that's sort of a lost thing. And fortunately, it's coming back. I mean, I remember I had an engineering class where I spent 20 minutes grilling my professor at lab about how this and that and this and that. And he said, Ryan, look, the whole point of this class is to get you to not just take things people say. You need to question things and understand them for yourself and think critically. And I think, okay, I got it, but that seems to be something that it's just not, it's frowned upon today. And I mean, that's something that, I mean, is that critical thinking and really looking at things that don't smell right? I mean, is that something that you're trying to help spark in people to just like, hey, it doesn't look right. It's probably a signal for you that it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's what we're trying to do. And then trying to, capitalize on the fact that that's kind of happening naturally to more and more people. Like I was saying, like there's all of these different polls coming out about, the support that President Trump has gotten through these indictments. The more indictments that are being thrown, right, the more support gathers. So that's telling me that the narrative structure of what the left has been selling is starting to break down, which provides us with an excellent opportunity to be able to, for those of us that know how to construct something that is entertaining and fun to watch and informative and kind of strung together and well told. There's a real opportunity for those of us that are willing to tell these kinds of stories, because I think there's an audience for it right now. And so when it comes to documentaries too, I think that's one of the things that I wanted to just mention is that I think Dinesh D'Souza is doing a good job with some stuff and some of the stuff that we're doing, but not all documentaries are kind of created equal. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people who refer to documentaries as just kind of a very large basket of things that people say, oh, well, it's a documentary. Well, no, not really. It's like a couple of people sitting there talking. It's just not a, basically when people say documentary, it means it's not scripted, right? It's, and so it's an unscripted format. And, but when I do documentaries, when my team works on documentaries, we always work on it from the standpoint of how do we make this feel like a film? Like how do we make this feel like it belongs on Netflix, it belongs on a major streaming platform, not just from the quality of the camera, but the quality of the storytelling. Like in this one, like I've said, it was because we're dealing with facts and figures and the story of a trial, it's a little bit harder sometimes to create emotional drama. So I was like experimenting with music. I was experimenting with images, like you'll see like you saw in the trailer. The title of the film comes on, and then all of a sudden the mesa flips upside down because it's like things have been flipped upside down. We don't know what's reality anymore. Just little things like that, kind of playing around with like a true crime kind of drama, maybe like a kind of what you would expect from a series on Netflix that's talking about, a series of unsolved mysteries, and so the hope is actually if people want to go to state-of-denial.com, like you said, we're going to be able to watch it on the 20th. But also there is a place where you can donate to help us continue the series, because there's lots of states of denial. I mean, we've got Georgia, we've got Michigan, we got Wisconsin. There's lots of opportunity to take this series and begin to explore these other states as well. Arizona wasn't the only one to have problems.
Yeah, and I mean, it's fascinating to see behind the scenes a little bit of just the filmmaking, because I know one of the interviews we did, the first one we did, I think that was the biggest downloads we've had on my podcast, was about the changes in Hollywood and the changes in Christian media, and how before in Christian media, the message was first, and then the story was kind of a secondary thing. And in Hollywood, it was always the story first, and then the message kind of comes. You kind of get it along with the story. And now that's flipped in Hollywood, and it's flipped in Christian media because the Christians finally get it now. And I love that. That's what you're doing here. Even with this highly data-driven, legal-driven process, you're able to tell it in a story fashion, and you're using it in a way that's engaging the listener and the viewer. And so I think we love that. We appreciate that because it's one thing. It's great to sit and listen to a lecture and get all the facts and all that. But when you put it in this kind of format, it just sticks. And it gives that motivation, like you said. I mean, even just the trailer. I mean, I saw people excited and blowing it up on Twitter already, just saying how amazing this trailer was, and how, geez, if that's the trailer, we got to see the film. And so I'm pretty sure our viewers are thinking the same thing. So I'm excited. I know what I'm going to be doing on the 20th.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so let's maybe zoom in a little bit on the actual film and the content. I mean, I know there's lots of different things that come into it when you actually look at the fraud that happens. I mean, we talk about the chain of custody, verifying voter signatures. There's different things like that, and things not working, printing on wrong papers. I mean, give us a little taste on that. Maybe we can zoom in on some of those. What are some of the things that actually took place during the election in Maricopa County?
Well, the three things that we decided to focus in on, because like I said, it's a very large case. There was lots of things that you could talk about, and lots of things that went wrong or sideways or were questionable. But what we decided was we had to kind of distill it down into three major buckets, is what we talked about. So one is the signature verification process, the chain of custody issues, and then the tabulation and printer problems, the machine reading problems. And even with those, we really had to distill down. So, like, for example, the printer issues, there was actually two main issues, and we could only really cover and unpack one in this documentary, just for the sake of trying to keep things streamlined. And the one that we picked, because there was two points. There was one that was a print to fit, or a misprint kind of a thing, where we've all seen this on our printers, where there's like the little box tick, and sometimes the image that you want to print is a little bit too big for the piece of paper, and so you click the little box and it shrinks it down into the paper. Well, if you do that on a ballot, the problem is that it throws the timing marks off, and those timing marks are critical in the way that the tabulator can read the ballot and actually know where the boxes or the bubbles that you filled in, go to the right person. And so it's kind of like, almost like, it's like code on the edge of the ballot. And so when those images are shrunk down into essentially it's a 20-inch paper, but it's got a 19-inch image, with a half-inch margin on each side, it throws off the tabulator. The tabulator can't read it, and so that's one of the things that happened. And so we go into that. But one of the things that happened too was that there was the wrong poundage of paper that was used, and the toner in the machines didn't set properly, because if you have too thick of a paper, printer can't heat the paper properly so that the toner sticks properly, and they created speckled ballots, and those speckled ballots were also rejected by the tabulators, because the tabulators were saying, well, this isn't right. These black marks that are supposed to be black have white in them. I don't know what it is. And so that was part of the problem. That's what led to like all of the long lines. And so when the signature verification thing, it's just real interesting. A lot of that had to do with the mail-in ballots. And when we're making this documentary, the team that we talked to said that 21% of the signatures that they were finding in 2020, because they were tasked by the Arizona Senate during the 2020 election to look over, one of their jobs was to look at the signature affidavit envelopes, and then, compare that with the exemplar images, which is usually somebody's voter registration card where they have the signature on them. And so they were, they set up this software. They were able to look at the signature, look at the exemplar, And what this team found that we interviewed, they found that 21% of the signatures were questionable.
Wow.
21% of the signatures were questionable.
And 20, that was from the 20.
That was the 2020 election. Yep.
Yeah.
And ironically,
wow.
the Rasmussen poll just came out 2 days ago. President Trump tweeted it out. It's been making pretty big, huge news. 1 out of 5 mail-in voters admit to committing fraud. Ironically, that's 20%.
Wow. Yeah. Well, interesting how that
found, and this poll is saying 20%.
I mean, shocker, right?
Right.
I mean, you got to be kidding me. I mean, I live in Iowa, and we've got, you have to have voter ID, and you have to have all these things. You have to have a reason to vote absentee, and so in other words, you have to have a reason to mail in. Not anybody can just mail in. I think it might. I'm not sure if it's as tight as it used to be, but I mean, we were traveling internationally, and we actually voted from another country, and so sometimes it's unavoidable and it's necessary. But you have these other places that were just mailing out ballots, even with addresses and names printed on them, which is just absolutely insane. And it's not the direction we need to be going. But I mean, did you find that? I mean, these kinds of things with the printers and the machines, I mean, these are pretty basic mistakes. I mean, like I've got a printer. I know what ink I need for the printer that I have. I mean, I've maybe bought the wrong ink before, but I didn't make the mistake twice. So are these nefarious mistakes, or are these mistakes that can we speculate on that? Were people doing all of these things on purpose? I mean, or are these things where, I mean, they're that creative in how they're going to steal this thing, or?
I like to put it this way, because you don't want to speculate, you don't want to throw somebody under the bus. I genuinely think that some of the people that I think some of the people in positions that get a lot of the crap thrown on them, I think a lot of them actually aren't part of some sort of big nefarious plot. I genuinely think that they think that they're doing the right thing. But this is the issue, is that regardless, if it's nefarious and people are doing nefarious things and making decisions and trying to subvert things, or if they're incompetent.
Yeah.
Okay. These are the two options.
Yeah.
These people should not be anywhere near our election systems. I don't care what category they fall into. We need to find different people to run our election systems if they fall into either one of those categories. So when somebody says, "Oh no, it's not. It was an accident, or we didn't know what was going to happen, or it was somebody else's fault, or whatever," it's like, I'm sorry, you're fired.
Yeah.
Get somebody in here that knows what the heck's going on. Because this is inexcusable, and so it really doesn't matter which side it falls on. But the thing is that people need to remember, and this is it reminds me of I was interviewing somebody of Romanian birth, okay, and she was talking about how her dad was she's probably my age, our age, so mid 40s, and so her dad would have been old enough to live under communist rule in Romania. And he explained to his daughter, he said the communists, they always find the kind of mediocre people, right? They don't want anybody too bright because they'll figure it out. And they don't want anybody too stupid because they'll muck it up. And so they want somebody right there in the middle. And the thing that really stands out to me as I'm making these documentaries is that, whether it be Colorado or Arizona, because I did an election documentary with Selection Code and kind of dug deep into Mesa County and Colorado and all of that sort of stuff up there. And this one in Arizona, the people all kind of fall under that kind of mediocre, kind of a little bit, I don't want to say, they're like, they think a little bit too highly of themselves. It's like they're kind of put into these positions of power because then the people kind of hold things over their head a little bit, you know what I mean? And they don't know enough to kind of screw things, you know, they don't know enough about what's going on, but I don't know, just they've kind of fall into that category, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you made the distinction between the fact that, my question about whether it was nefarious certainly is not whether or not it's excusable. It's inexcusable whether it's nefarious or whether it's just incompetence or whatever it might be. I mean, it's like Hillary Clinton's emails. Like the FBI and all these people just came up with this new criteria where, well, she didn't mean to share these emails and she didn't mean it. Well, it's like, well, that's not what it says. Did you do it or not? Yes or no. That doesn't matter your intention. It's what it happened, and people need to be held accountable for it. And so I'm glad you made that distinction, because that's certainly not where I was going with that question.
It's like your kid coming to you, you know? It's like, well, I didn't mean to spill a bunch of black paint or green paint all over the garage floor. It's like, well, you still did it.
Well, yeah. What were you doing that let it happen?
What were you doing in the garage playing with the paint? You know what I mean? Like you're not supposed to be right. It's ridiculous.
Wow. So talk to us about, I saw it's on Twitter, it's on Rumble, it's on the website. I mean, how do people watch this and make sure they're ready to go? Do you know what time it's going to be? Tell everybody to make sure they're ready to watch this on the 20th.
Yeah. So you're going to want to go to State of Denial AZ. So at State of Denial AZ on X. Or for those of you that, still call it Twitter.
Formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, formerly known as Twitter. The app formerly known as Twitter. But so go to State of Denial AZ there, follow there. And then on Rumble, you can look up State of Denial. We are working on getting the vanity URL set up for that. It's a little hard sometimes when you're trying to create a new Rumble channel and you don't have a lot of followers, because you have to have so many followers so you can set your vanity URL. So we're working on that right now, but you can go to State of Denial, but also go to the website. So state-of-denial.com. And then we'll also be posting on Truth as well. There's a State of Denial Truth. I think that one's just at State of Denial on Truth. And we are going to be posting it out on Wednesday the 20th. And it's going to be free. And people can just share it and watch it. Rumble has an app on your TV. You can pull it up on your TV. You can watch it on X and cast it up onto your TV. And watch it from home. I think we're planning on releasing it about prime time. So, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central kind of thing.
Okay, great. And then I think there's one question I had final about this film is that, it ends on a note of hope. And I know there's a lot of, or it gives hope. I know that was something that's important. And so there's a lot of negativity and a lot of hopelessness and a lot of panic and a lot of just all this negativity coming around these sorts of things. But tell us about the hope that we should have in this. I mean, obviously we're getting armed, we're getting knowledge, we're going to be able to effectively challenge these corrupt systems. Is that the hope that we're getting? Tell us about that in this film.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's because it's like people say, like, well, because it was a challenge. It's like, these lawyers that put everything out on the line, they still, quote unquote, lost the challenge, right? But they're pushing forward, right? They're pushing forward and saying, well, no, we're going to go through the appeals process. We're going to do everything that we can. We're going to bring new litigation. And some of the stuff that we even talk about in the documentary, where it's like the challenge that we have in election litigation is that you have to do it in a certain amount of time. It's super fast. You don't really have a lot of discovery and all this other stuff. And what we're discovering now, a year from the trial, there was a lot of things that even Maricopa had to come out and admit to that they didn't admit to, beforehand, or they didn't comply with the open records requests in time, thinking that, oh, well, we'll just, we'll send you that to you like 7 months later, you know what I mean, kind of thing. And so now there's more things happening. And what people need to realize, and we kind of wrap this up in the film, is that it used to be that we could trust our judicial system, like we talked about, but we could trust our election systems, right? Where we thought like, okay, well, I'm going to go in. My duty is to go and vote, right? Or, if I want to, I can volunteer and be a part of the process. Yay, patriotism. And then at the end of the day after the election, all the cards are in, and all right, wait, well, congratulations to the winner, and if my side didn't win, that really didn't matter because we were all Americans, and better luck next time, kind of a thing. We'll see how this all shakes out, but we're all going to work together on that. And now it's kind of gotten to the point where it's not really like that anymore, because there is some kind of like what you said, is it nefarious? Or is it incompetence? And the fact that this keeps happening over and over again, I don't think people are that stupid. I think that there's probably something going on. And so if there's something going on, then we have to change the way that we approach, the way that we look at this. It can no longer be that we just accept the results. It has to be that we have to verify. We have to get involved. We have to change the way that we go about doing these things. And this is an uncomfortable time period that we're in. But, I would challenge you that it's no more uncomfortable than it was back in the year 1776, when all of a sudden we had to send petition after petition after petition to King George just to get our basic human rights back. And finally, when they said, screw you, and we all said, all right, well, we're going to have to take up arms, and they fired the first shot. Well, that was pretty uncomfortable. That was an uncomfortable time period. And a lot of people look back on that, and they look back on it with a certain amount of, kind of mystique, like, oh yeah, the revolution. But those people didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know if all of a sudden they were going to lose and, everybody was going to die, or what was going to happen. You know what I mean? It was very, very tumultuous time. And so we just happen to be in one of those time periods. And I hope that this documentary helps people understand that. I think that we need to realize that we as Americans, we need to level up. We need to level up in our engagement, in our civic responsibilities. We can't just trust the school system to teach our kids civics anymore. We actually, because we don't know, we have to be re-engaged with what it means to actually help govern a civil society and be a part of the process. And everybody needs to be involved with that, And so that's what I hope this does, is it's kind of like, oh, and I think that's what happened in 2020 was a real knock on the head for a lot of people. I think that a lot of people kind of went, whoa, hold on a second. The world is not what I thought or what I was being sold it was. There's something else going on here. And I think the more that people start pulling up the rocks and looking underneath the rug and going like, wait a minute, there's something, I can smell it. There's a smell. I can swear, when there's a smell in your house, you can't do anything else until you figure out what the smell is. Right. Yeah. We're just that part. We're just at that time where there's a smell in our house and we're trying to figure out what the smell is. And to have people say, oh, well, just ignore it. You'll just get used to it. Just sit down and watch football again. It's like that. It can't happen. It's not going to happen. You're not going to happen. You're not going to go to sleep. You're not going to sit down and rest until you figure out that, oh crap, there was a dead fish that fell underneath the sink, or, a dirty diaper got left in the sofa, or whatever it was. Yeah. But we got to sniff it out.
Yeah. And I think you're bringing to the light the truth of what's really going on, and sort of, COVID woke a lot of people up. I mean, fortunately, we were sort of awake before that, so we could kind of just watch the thing playing out in front of us without any surprise at all. But an uninformed electorate is the big issue. I mean, when I ran for office for the Iowa House in 2020, I was told by these people who are teaching you how to run a campaign that probably 10% of people are informed, engaged, or less. And the rest are you just hope they see your name and they don't really know what's going on. And so we think that we need a constitutional convention or a convention of states and all this, but that's not the problem. The problem is uninformed electorate, people who are not engaged, people who are not paying attention to what's going on. Well, we sort of woke up the beast now with all of this and these kinds of films arming people with, you just have a sense. I love your analogy that something's wrong. Something doesn't smell right. And what these do is just validate what we all just know in our spirit. It just validates what we just can't quite put our finger on it. Maybe we got maybe some data that kind of supports it. And what this does is just puts that exclamation point underlined, makes it so clear and in your face. And so, and it emboldens us to continue fighting and to continue going out and to continue going after these things. And we're seeing more people run for office, like I mentioned, and more people holding public officials accountable. And we're seeing even, I even heard different senators and representatives say, you'd be surprised if 10 people reach out on the same issue to them. Like, that's a big deal. And so, or even 5 people, multiple people, because then they may want to fight for something, but if nobody's talking to them about it, they're going to go to the leadership and say, hey, look, I promise nobody's contacting me about it, but, and so they want to represent the interest. Well, we need to be reaching out and engaging and telling them what we expect and what we want. And that sort of gives them ammunition as well. So I think this will help equip people to do that.
And a lot of people, when it comes to like, it's so funny to me when people like look at, they'll bring up 2,000 mules, right? They'll be like, oh, well, 2,000 mules, it didn't do anything. Like we're still having a problem. And it's like it's the documentary's responsibility to fix the issue. It's like, no, that's not the point. It's like, well, Joe Rogan talked about it. Nobody did anything. It's like, well, that's not the point. The point is that you're supposed to do something. Everybody's supposed to do something. And we can't build a house. And that's the other thing too, is that we can't build a house with one tool. So, I might make a really great hammer, right? Mm-hmm. But you still can't build a house with just a hammer. You're going to have a hard time sawing wood. You're going to have a hard time screwing in drywall. You're going to have a hard time, doing whatever else you got to do. There's a whole variety of tools. And so when it comes to rebuilding our country or to communicating the issues, it's like we need podcasters, right? We need the Epic Times and people that can write really great articles. We need polls. We need documentaries. We need, narratives, actually, not just unscripted, but scripted. We need people that are, telling stories that have values. So like we need communications. Communications is a wide variety of things. And to expect one thing to fix the problem is just really, really short-sighted. And it's not really about, just sitting. And that's the thing that a lot of people, unfortunately, our reality TV world has kind of created. It's like I can sit on the couch, watch HGTV and think that I'm doing something because I'm watching a bunch of DIY stuff. And I think, oh, well, I watched somebody put in a window or I watched somebody make something, I did something myself. That's a true phenomenon. That's actually something that's truly a psychological thing that people are studying. But the issue is not just the fact that that there's something going on or how to fix the problem. Are you going out and doing something? Right. So like, for example, me, I know how to tell a story. I know how to take something and put it into a package that people want to sit down and watch and maybe hopefully create some conversation. That's my part to play. Now, I hand the baton through the TV to somebody else and say, what can you do? What are you doing? Are you going to talk about it with a friend of yours? Are you going to go down to your precinct? Are you going to go down to your board of supervisors and that paper ballots are used in the next election and hand counting? Even if you use the tabulators, are you going to actually count them with hand and then verify them with the machine? Kind of like what we used to do with calculators. It's like we actually count money by hand and use the machine at the same time. Kind of like verify with both. Trust but verify. Are we going to do that? Yeah. Are we going to demand that? Because it's going to take the people that are actually looking at this and saying, yeah, I know that the election's screwed, the election problems, there's a bunch of blah, 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 blah. And they just sit there and complain on social media, and you see it all the time. And it's like, and they get into arguments with each other, and it's stop. Go down and actually do something. Go and engage face to face with a human being down in your elections department. Get some people, like you said, you only need a handful of people at the local level. That's what a lot of people don't understand. It's like you don't need 1 million people to show up at your state capitol. Right. You don't need 1 million people to show up at your county courthouse. You just need a very small handful of people on the local level can change the needle. And that's what they're scared of. That's what the people that have built this apparatus that holds this kind of facade of like, everything's fine, just go back to sleep. Like that's what they're hoping. They're hoping that people will not see that it doesn't take that much to actually to actually swing the fulcrum on this.
That's right. Well said. Well, Matt, we just got about 3 minutes left here. Tell us anything else you want to let us know that Spiro Pictures or you have coming down the pike, and how else they can follow you and what you're doing.
Yeah. So if you want to follow us at Spiro Pictures, we're on X, we're on Truth. You can follow us there and see what we're up. You know, my wife has been helping promote a Christmas movie that we didn't make, but somebody else did, and so we've been working on that. Working on some other scripts and things. So hopefully, gonna be doing some scripted stuff. Been doing a lot of documentaries, and I'd like to be moving into, working on some stories, and that's really where my heart is. But yeah, I really am encouraging everybody right now is, follow at State of Denial AZ on Twitter and Truth, and then go to stateofdenial.com, state-of-denial.com on the 20th. Watch the film, and then donate for us to continue the saga. And we'd love to make a series just going out and tackling every single one of these states that just find themselves in denial, because that's what I love about the name, is that it's swinging the narrative back in their face, and they're saying, oh, you're going to call us election deniers? Actually, you're the ones that are living in denial because you refuse to confront an obvious problem.
That's right. Well said. Well, Matthew Thayer, filmmaker, director, award-winning guy here. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Tamara Scott Show. It's been great to talk with you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you, buddy.
All right. Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. I want to thank our sponsors again, MyPillow. You can go to mypillow.com, my store, and my coffee, and use promo code Tamara. And I want to thank Bella Grace Elixir, another sponsor with those great clean ingredients. And you can go to tamara.bellagraceglobal.com to get more there. And thank you so much for listening. I'm Ryan Howard in for Tamara Scott Today. You can find more about me at ryanshoward.com. You can get my podcast on all the podcast apps. It's called Cutting Edge Faith. So thank you so much for joining and watching today, and we'll see you next time. God bless.